So I read this book, Breast and Eggs, by Miko Kawakami. I finished this back in January. This book is 430 pages long. It's by a Japanese author, translated by Sam Bett and David Boyd. First of all, I just love this cover. I was attracted immediately. I don't really like it when there's so many blurbs on the book, just like covered. It's kind of distracting, and I feel like if it's trying too hard, like if there's so many blurbs and recommendations, that it's because the book doesn't really speak for itself. One of them says it's a feminist masterwork, and another calls it original, and I wouldn't agree with those descriptions. But there are some other blurbs that were more apt, like Kawakami writes with unsettling precision about the body. She's especially good at capturing its longings. Or a dispassionate but honoring gaze cast on working class women, dogged and unsentimental in their survival. Like, those blurbs are interesting to me, but if it just says something like fantastic or stunning, like, what's the point of putting that on the cover? It's just distracting. So this book is about a family of working class women in Japan. They're sisters, two sisters, and they're raised by all women, their mother and their grandmother. And they were very poor, and their mother basically worked herself to death. And then their grandmother also died eventually, so then the older sister had to take care of the younger sister. But the story starts with the older sister now has a daughter of her own and is a single working mother, so she kind of can't get out of that cycle. And the younger sister is trying to become a writer, wants to become a writer. The older sister is visiting Tokyo with her daughter because she wants to get breast implants. She's obsessed with getting breast implants, and she's coming to the city to speak with a specialist about it. So, like, the whole first half of the book is breasts. And what I thought was interesting is that the first part of the book is from the perspective of the younger sister. She's not even the one getting who wants the breast implants, but it's from her perspective. So it was interesting that the author chose to write it that way instead of giving more agency to the older sister and having that part of the story told from the older sister's perspective. And then because of that too, everything in the first part of the book is kind of has a more of a cramped feeling and a narrow scope, because most of the action takes place in the sister's small apartment. And so we don't even get to follow the older sister around to her appointments or to her meet the doctors or, anything like that. And then the first part is also a little sprinkled in with some excerpts from the daughter's diary, she's approaching puberty, and so all of her diary entries are about menstruation and sex, and because all of those things are on her mind right now in that age, in that part of her life. So then we get a little glimpse into the relationship between the mother and the daughter, told through the daughter's perspective. So we do get a little bit of someone else's perspective, but it just felt a little disjointed a little bit. I wasn't really enjoying the first part of the book. I almost put it down and didn't continue it. But then once I got into the second part, I started enjoying it much more. And the second part actually takes place 10 years later, and now the younger sister is a successful writer. Oh, there's 2 little butterflies flying around. So where was I? Oh yes, the second part of the book is the egg portion. She starts to reflect on her life and realizes she wants to have a child, and we learn that she's actually asexual. And so what is an asexual woman to do if she wants a child? She doesn't want to be married. She doesn't want to be in a relationship in that way. So she turns to artificial insemination. But because Japan is very conservative, the doctors will only provide that service to married couples. So she has to find a back channel. And this is where the book gets really humorous, because she starts to explore the idea of like a freelance sperm donor, and that can get pretty sketchy. And I just remember this one scene, and I felt so bad for her, but it was also so funny, where she goes to meet a potential donor, and he's kind of a pervert, kind of a creep, and it turns into a really awkward situation really quickly. The whole second half of the book was more interesting because there's way more perspectives she's coming across way more people, and of course everyone feels like they're entitled to have an opinion about the matter. She's very open about discussing this with people, but she even goes so far as to, she comes across this like support group of adults who were born that way with conceived that way with artificial insemination. And it's a support group because they feel now that they're grown, they have opinions about it, and they have they're very anti-artificial insemination, and so she starts going to these groups just to hear what they have to say, and then she kind of starts up a relationship with one of the main leaders of this group. He had a memoir, and she became obsessed with his opinion on the matter. And so she starts meeting up with him, and I just think that their relationship was so sweet in the book, and I really liked their friendship that was forming. And I don't want to give away the end, but it was very cute ending, I thought, and satisfying. And yes, so I enjoyed Breasts and Eggs by Miko Kawakami. Oh, an interesting thing, I was reading reviews that said that the first half of the book, the breasts part, was actually a short story that the author wrote years ago, and then she decided to expand upon it and write the full-length novel. And so I thought that was interesting because I preferred the second half, which was the new stuff she wrote. I just thought there was more interesting characters in the second half. I was more invested in what happens with the main character, and it just felt like there was more action and plot going on.
is March 21st, and I've been reading up a storm, so I need to sit down and talk about these books. And I'm realizing as I'm going through my notebook that I'm really bad about writing notes. That's okay, we're just going to go off my memory. First book was this lovely fantasy, Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marlier. And this book was exactly what I needed at the beginning of the year. I got engrossed right away. It's pretty hefty too. It is 554 pages, and it's in one of these old classic paperbacks, which are going away, sadly. Fairy tale with swans. It's called The Wild Swans by Hans Christian Andersen. It's about a princess who saves her 11 brothers from a curse by their evil stepmother who turns them into swans. But in this one, she just has 6 brothers. She's the 7th child. And it's set in ancient Ireland, where there's still lots of magic. There's like fairy folk and druids and magic, obviously, since the evil stepmother turns the brothers into swans. But she's the youngest, and she is learning to become a healer. So she's like an herbalist. In order to save her brothers, the Lady of the Forest, like the fairy, gives her a task to complete. She has to make her brother's shirts out of this very prickly plant, and she can't talk during this time until she's finished her task. And so it's about her completing this task, all the people she comes across. There's romance in there. The protagonist is somebody you really root for. And it's one of those fantasies that seems rooted in reality. Like it really feels like it's set in this time, like this ancient Ireland. So I wouldn't say it's like a high fantasy where everything's made up. It's like clearly set in a world that we recognize, but just in the past. The author's writing is very engrossing, and you really feel like I really felt like I was there, and I was so engrossed, and I read through this book so quickly. And it's a series, so I'll probably continue on with the other books in the series because I liked it that much. Another book I read earlier this year was The Cement Garden by Ian McEwan. He's the same author of Atonement. This one's a very short book. I mean, look at the formatting. It's only 153 pages. It's about 3 siblings, a brother and his 2 sisters, and they live in this really broken, this really rundown neighborhood. They're like the only house that's still standing on this block. Everything else was supposed to be built, but then never did. So it's a lot of like half-empty shells of houses. So they kind of grow up out of the way of other children. There's not really any other children around. They obviously go to school, but they're very close-knit. I'm missing a brother. There was a little brother too. So 2 brothers, 2 sisters. Parents both eventually pass away. So they are left to fend for themselves, and starts off being very innocent, and they're kind of like having a blast, living on their own. Nothing's really, there's no structure, there's no order. They're it's like vacation for them. And then eventually things start to turn weird. And that's all I'm going to say. But it's definitely a quick read, and a little disturbing. Just a warning if you're not into those if you're not into like gothic horror type things, avoid this. If you are, this is a good read. Okay, next book is Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Malors. This book was interesting. I feel like there was a lot going on, as in like it jumped around to different characters, but there really wasn't much of a plot. So it's kind of more about the characters themselves, and because of that, I didn't enjoy it so much because I didn't really like the characters in this book. The only character I liked was didn't come until like halfway through the book. Eleanor was the only character that I really enjoyed reading their POV. She was funny. She had a lot of humorous, observant things to say. But all the other characters, not so much. Cleo, didn't really like her as a person, or Frank was okay. Didn't really connect with anyone besides Eleanor. And there's only like 2 chapters dedicated to her POV. But basically Cleo and Frank meet at a party, and Cleo is British and needs a visa to stay in the country, so they impulsively get married, and Frank is much older than her. Cleo's an artist. Yeah. Cleo's character felt very shallow to me. Everything was always like about how beautiful she was and how delicate, and like her sense of fashion. It was a lot of like telling, but didn't seem to really like get into, because there's no plot. You don't really have opportunities to like show people's personalities too much. I don't know. I didn't enjoy this one. I almost didn't finish reading this one. Okay, then I've got this one, Lost Lambs by Madeline Cash, which I got in the January book of the month. This is something that bothers me about hardcover books, and I'm not sure if it's just book of the month that does this, because I don't really buy hardcover books, but just the format and the layout of these, it just seems like it's so much wasted materials and wasted space. Like, there's this, like, the text is so big, and like it almost feels like a large print, and there's so much like white space around it, and I know some people might enjoy that, but to me it just feels like I'm paying, so much money for this, and there's like nothing. It's like getting a bag of chips and it's mostly air. Anyways, ranting aside, this book was funny. I really enjoyed reading this book. It was pretty quick. It's 320 pages. I thought it was funny. I thought all the characters were quirky and interesting. The story was interesting. It's about a family in this town where this town is kind of run by this wealthy man who owns like kind of everything, all the business in town. 3 daughters, and they're all their individual personality, and they're all very strong-willed, and then it also goes into the mother and the father as well. The father works for this wealthy man, and there's like a conspiracy and a plot that the middle sister uncovers, and they're all involved, and basically they've uncovered something shady happening in the town, and they kind of like it all they're all involved in different ways and don't realize it kind of until like the end, which is fun. And then another funny thing that I noticed when reading this was, so there's a plot point in the beginning where these gnats have like gone into the church. Anyone who visits the church, they're always like constantly swatting at the gnats. And while I was reading, I kept coming across words that I thought were just spelled wrong, and I was like, how could they have missed this? How did the editor miss this? But then I realized that what was actually happening was they were putting in extra G's anytime in a word where there was like an N and gnat. So like it was like the gnats were infesting the book too. So for example, words like donate, but they spelt it DOGNAT because that spells gnat. So words like that. And then when they finally get rid of the gnats, like halfway through the book, then that stops. And then the spelling goes away. So I thought it was like going crazy at first, and I think that was very clever of the author, because then you kind of get a feeling for what they were feeling like with all these gnats all the time infesting the church. Yes, so that's Lost Lambs, which I thought was very funny. Then we have another book of the month, which I really enjoyed. This was for March. It's called Lady Tremaine, and this is another fairy tale retelling of, this time, Cinderella, but it's from the viewpoint of the evil stepmother. Her name is Lady Tremaine, and she's a falconer, hence the falcon on the cover. I loved this book. This was another one that I got really engrossed in. I thought the writing was really beautiful. It was very well written. It seemed like the plot was very... it didn't seem like there was any like wasted plot. Everything kind of was important to the plot. I really liked that the author decided to make Lady Tremaine, the evil stepmother, a falconer, because it went through all the different things involved in training a falcon, and like the trust that's involved, but also like the things you do to train it, like just feeding it the right amount and like gaining its trust and things like that, because it's a wild animal that you're training to hunt for you, and it's not a pet. They make that very clear. And I thought that was an excellent foil to also explore, or to mirror, like her relationship with her daughters in the book, with how she deals with the situations she's put in with being poor, and like all the intrigue in court, and like the appearances that she puts up. I thought that the way the author chose to flip up the story of Cinderella was fun. How in this book Cinderella was the one that wasn't really doing anything, and the stepmother and the stepdaughters were the ones doing most of the work and taking care of the house. Meanwhile, Cinderella was trying to keep herself out of all the hard labor, because she was raised to be a lady, and so in her mind that's what she should be focusing on. And meanwhile, the stepmother's just trying to keep the house from falling down around them. Obviously, there's like the romance with the prince, but then there's another romance that the stepmother is involved in, which it's always refreshing to have characters who are of different ages or who are older than like normally would be considered for a love story to have a romance. There's like more to it obviously than just the ball. You find out some things about the royal family. The ball's almost like falls kind of like right in the middle, and then there's like this whole plot afterwards, which was fun. But yes, if you like fairy tale retellings, read Lady Tremaine. Oh, by Rachel Hockhauser. Okay, and then last one for now is The Keep by Jennifer Egan. This one's a quick one. This is 255 pages, and it's like a gothic horror. It was labeled as a gothic horror. I would not call it a horror. And there's mention of like it being kind of like a ghost story, which I also didn't really get much of. This was an odd book. It was a little bizarre. I really enjoyed most of it up until the end. I didn't like the ending. But basically, it starts off right off the bat, telling you that he's unreliable, and that he might not even be the character in the story that you think he is, which is intriguing. And then you realize like it switches between two different stories, where one's set in the castle in Europe, and the other is a prisoner in jail writing this story for a writing class. Yes, liked that it kept jumping between the two. I thought that was very interesting, and I did like the setting of the castle. It wasn't very spooky to me though. I think that most of the like bizarreness and the paranoia and the like tense, like unnerving bits came from the character himself, because he was a very unnerving, paranoid person. But like, so like he turned all these situations into something they're not. And I don't know, it was kind of obvious that everything was going on in his head, so it wasn't very spooky in my opinion. Not like Haunting of Hill House, where things are not what they seem, or things are kind of slowly sliding into bizarre situations, and you're not quite sure what's real and what's not. This, to me, was kind of obvious that he was just a paranoid person. I didn't think that the ending was it didn't like match the rest of the it just left too many. It didn't like wrap everything up, which kind of bothers me sometimes. Because it doesn't have to be a happy ending, but it just needs to like have an ending, if you know what I mean. But yeah, so that's The Keep by Jennifer Egan.